We're talking with Bob Dowd, the athletic director and Hall of Fame member of the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association. Bob, first of all, I appreciate you having a conversation with us.
No, not a problem.
And we've started these interviews so far with kind of starting from the beginning. So you're a Central New York guy.
Central New York guy.
Kind of maybe start with the beginning and where it started.
All right. I think I was probably about 7th grade. A friend of mine named Kevin Martin, who went on to be an All-American at Hobart. Kevin's dad was a PE instructor at Cortland State, and we were just a bunch of rugrats running around, and he had a bunch of wooden sticks in his backyard and a big old tub, and we pulled them out one summer and put the tongue depressors and stuff into the the sidewall, and took the lacquer and put them all on to get the sidewall back up, and we started playing with the wooden sticks, which was the stick. And then, you know, we bombed around. We were in junior high, so we played basketball and football, and in the spring there was nothing to do, so we just, would horse around with these sticks. And then we started watching Cortland State games. There was a guy there named Johnny Evernance, who was from Long Island, long-haired, ponytail guy with a beard, wearing the old back rack long cage helmets, playing with a wooden stick. And Cortland State was playing Cornell at Cortland, and Cortland just pounded them. And Cornell had, like in '73, and Cornell had done, I think they were either national champs or right there in '72. And I remember the place was packed. It was on the back alumni fields, and you were all standing behind the ropes, and the golden retriever was there, and it went out on the field and stole the lacrosse ball, and the officials were chasing the dog, and the whole thing, and we just kind of fell in love with it. It was a great thing to watch. And then as a freshman year at high school, Cortland High started a program. So there were 6 freshmen. We all decided that we were going to play. I remember I went to practice the first day and got a helmet. It was this ancient thing. It wasn't even a back rack. I mean, it was pre-back rack days.
Leather?
It seemed that way. I think you could fold it up and put it in your back pocket. I kind of felt like my dad's football helmet in the 30s. I remember taking it home, and my dad just looked at it and said, "This isn't going to work." And so, we didn't have any, I just had an old wooden stick, and so he thought it would be great. He went to Ithaca, into a sporting goods store that serviced Cornell, and came home with a brand new white back rack hat, and I had a pair of these back rack gloves that were made out of naga hide that didn't matter what you did, you couldn't bend the fingers, and the whole thing. And he brings me back this great lacrosse stick they sold him, which was a super attack stick, wooden. And I remember just saying, "Oh, Dad, I was really hoping for a plastic head." STX had just come out with the Sam 10, and so he was all disappointed. I was disappointed. I got over it. I don't know, some kid in practice later that year, an upperclassman, broke his head, threw it away. I grabbed it. My dad drilled the holes in the side and firmly believed that wire could fix anything. And glued the sidewall together and wired the whole thing back up, The next thing I know, I've got this aluminum shaft that felt like it weighed about 50 pounds. They made me a defenseman because I'm so fleet of foot. And I got this busted sidewall Sam STX head. The first slap check you throw, the wire breaks, and my dad's like, "Don't worry, bring it home, we can fix it again." So I had this stick that had all this wire all over it, and that's kind of the way lacrosse started in Central New York.
What did Dad do?
My father was a history professor at Cortland State.
Okay, so an educator.
Obviously. Yeah, he was an iron lather in New York City after World War II, and he did a bunch of different stuff in the city. And then the city and the Jersey area started getting a little rough to him in the early 60s, and so he packed all of us up, and we moved up to Cortland. And that's where I went to, I think I moved up there in 2nd grade. And
so Dad didn't play lacrosse?
No, Dad played football. That was it.
Okay.
And he went to St. Teresa's High his senior year in Detroit, which was, I think it's 7 in Claremont or something like that, downtown Detroit. He spent his senior year there and enlisted and fought in Italy and came back and went to Cornell and did a bunch of crazy stuff.
I should point out in 1960 there were something like 24 high schools in Detroit in the Detroit Catholic League and Detroit Diocese. It was a very large.
Oh, it was huge.
With lots of 80 and 90 student body enrollment type thing. So
and a great number of Division I athletes.
So you played in high school.
Played in high school. went to Cortland State, had a not so successful first semester. Was invited then to attend the local community college, and I did. Played there. Played for a year or so at Cortland. And I had a great coach. I mean, Chuck Winters was the coach at Cortland State at the time and was just a great guy. And I mean, I was a nobody up there, local kid that never got. We got recruited by Hobart, more for football, but I met Schmidt and those guys who were the coaches at the time at Hobart, and ended up going to Cortland State. And and there was a guy named Rich Ciccone, who was a teacher in Homer Central, which is right next to Cortland. It's two small towns next to each other. And Rich wanted to know if anybody could find a coach. So he talked to Chuck Winters, and Winters talked to me. And it was a very, very sweet talk in the long run. I mean, here's a college coach looking at a kid who at best is going to be your sixth defenseman, and is constantly getting recruited over by Long Island guys. And, Greg, you understand right away that when you see a kid from Long Island, you see yourself that, you were a decent player in high school in Central New York, but you weren't one of the best ones. You just looked at the talent and you said, these guys are just so much better than I am. They were faster, they had better sticks, they just were better. I knew the game, I understood the game, and I understood how to cut corners as a defenseman and how to work angles and how to catch an attackman from the side and those kinds of things. But Coach Winters just wanted to know if I wanted to go coach. And I said, yeah. So I ended up at Homer Central. And
while you're still in college?
Well, I'm still in college. And
so there was a playing dream, so to speak.
Well, yeah, but I also understood it.
Right.
It was clear. It wasn't like I was, being, shunned. I completely understood.
The grass was greener.
Oh, God, yes. Not just greener. It was safer. It was a lot safer.
Right.
So I started coaching at Homer. And that led to a lot of opportunities for me. It really did. One of the things when you coached up there in the late 70s and early 80s, you understood and you met West Genesee High all the time. And they just were unstoppable. They were what a phenomenal program that Coach Mhslca ran up there. But we wanted to find out what was better. I mean, we, as a staff, there were three of us, Doak Brown and Rich Ciccone and myself, and we kept asking what makes them so much better than us. I mean, because they were clearly much better than us. I mean, we even tried one time to tell you how bad it got. We even took a defenseman and put him in the cage, put a chest protector on him, had him play behind our goalie to try and, we just played man down to see if we could make more saves. That didn't work so good a lot either, by the way. But so we found out from Mhslca what he did. He ran a box league, he ran summer leagues, he ran a bunch of different leagues for kids, and his best players came back every summer, and they would take 1 to 2 kids under their wings, and they would show them what they learned in college. So here these 5th, 6th, 7th graders up through juniors in high school, and this All-American from Syracuse named Brad Katz all of a sudden comes back, spends the summer at West Genny, and he's got 4 kids that he is privately tutoring, right, in a sense, in everything that he learned at Syracuse in their running gun style of play at the time, and how to make themselves better and how to get better. So at Homer, we said, we'll try that. So Rich put me in charge of the of the summer programs, and we ran a summer camp. We took a field, cut it in half, put 2x4, put the plywood, in the goals, and we had kids grades 3 through 6 there. And then we had, right after them for an hour, then after that we would have the 7th and 8th graders come up for an hour. And we took our high school kids who were getting better and better because they were really good athletes at the time, and they still are. If you look at Homer Central, they still put, this tiny little cow town is still putting 4 or 5 kids into Division I and top Division III schools every year.
Wow.
It just has a tradition of doing that, and they've been doing it since the late 70s. And so then we'd take our kids and we'd have them coach these kids. And then we started a summer league where we had 6, 7, 8 grades in one, and then we had a high school league, and then we had what we called the old guys league. And we literally took, it would be guys like me at the time. I was probably 22, 23. I was out here at Country Day teaching and coaching, going home for the summers. And we would take guys like me and other guys that played at Cortland or played at Syracuse or played at Hobart, who were, or Geneseo or Nazareth, who were Homer grads, and they'd all come back, and we all knew each other. we'd have a ball, and there was 6 different teams, different colors, and you'd kill each other during the game, and after the game you'd go downtown and have a beer and just laugh your ass off.
Right.
So, we would be doing that, and we would take the better high school kids and put them in our league, in that league. So immediately they're getting better talent, they're facing better competition every week. And then there was a club league in Syracuse on Sundays for college kids and college graduates. And we had a team for that too. So we had teams at every level and doing that. So like my last year at Homer was 1982. Yeah, the spring of 82. Off of that team, we had 9 guys become Division I or Division III All-Americans.
Wow.
And so Homer continued that stuff. And after I left coaching there and came out here, I'd go home for the summers, as I said, and deal with that.
Now, what year at Hobart you got your teaching certificate? Your
At
teaching
Cortland.
degree?
No, Cortland,
Okay.
please. I didn't go to Hobart.
Oh, sorry. I see the Cortland sign up there. That's my mistake.
Yeah.
So you got somewhere along the line you went back to coaching, but you finished
Yeah.
with your teaching degree.
Had a teaching degree from Cortland State, secondary social studies, history, poli-sci.
Did you always pretty much know you were going to be a teacher?
No, I was going to be a lawyer.
How did it change?
It changed when I started coaching,
Okay.
believe it or not. I just enjoyed coaching.
And
And
like the kids.
I watch kids catch an idea. You see that light flash in their eyes and go. And then, I was at law school. I got accepted at law school at Syracuse Law. So I did a semester there, and I was managing a bar. And as seems like every history major and jock did it somewhere at Cortland State, it involved drinking and managing bars. And so I'm managing this bar, and I've got 3 lawyers working for me. Now, this is the early 80s when, as you would remember, trying to find a teaching job was next to impossible.
Absolutely.
Trying to find a job was next to impossible. And these guys couldn't find a law job. And they all had their degrees, 2 from New England College of Law and 1 from Syracuse. And they're all working for me. 1 was a bartender and 2 were bouncers, and I'm just like, holy smokes, fellas. And they're like, Bob, law is not where you want to be. So I went back to Cortland, did what they called the professional, and got my teaching certificate. I'm teaching at Homer, full-time sub, thinking life is good. April 15th, 1982, Larry King, Bubba King was his name, was the principal, and he was an All-American attackman at Cortland State. It seems like everybody, at Cortland State somewhere you became a teacher, you were a football player, a lacrosse player, you were something. So Larry came down to my room and said that the woman who I was in for had decided to return. She was out on a pregnancy leave. She'd had 3 children in 3 years, and everybody thought she was never going to come back to teaching. Well, she did. So I didn't have a job.
Right.
So I'm out looking around, and there's the Iowa State placement folder, and kids today don't ever do these things, but back in the dark ages you had to. So here's the Iowa State placement folder with all kinds of teaching jobs in it. And it's at the Career Center at Cortland State. And there's this place that's called Detroit Country Day School, and they're looking for a history teacher, lacrosse coach, and football coach. I said, wow, funny name for a public school. Because in central New York, if it didn't have a saint in front of it, it's a public school. So I said, wow, funny name for a public school. It says Detroit, and it's in some place called Beverly Hills. I don't understand this. So I throw a resume out and a cover letter. And about 3 weeks later, it's about 5:30 in the morning, I get a phone call from a guy named Gene Riley. And typical sub, typical 22-year-old in Cortland. I'd been out till about 3 o'clock the night before. My father firmly believed, his generation at least, that when the phone rings, you answer it.
Right.
You can't say, no, he's still asleep, can I take a message? No, you would never say that. You would say, certainly, let me get him for you.
At 5:30 in the morning.
At 5:30 in the morning. So Dad wakes me up, and I'm groggy as all get out, and I get on the phone, and for an hour and 15 minutes, I'm talking lacrosse with this guy named Gene Riley, who's from Detroit Country Day School. And he's asking me, man up, man down, rides, clears, what would you do in this situation? How would you do this? When would you do that? What do you do in practices? And I'm thinking to myself, what in God's name is this all about? I can't remember where this place is. Who is this guy?
Right.
So, the conversation ends. He says, thank you. He goes, we'll be in touch. Well, my dad's sitting at the kitchen table. I mean, again, 2 phones in the house, one in the kitchen, one in my parents' bedroom. And I'm living at home. Privacy, there's no such creature. What's a private phone call? So my dad looks at me over the Syracuse Post-Standard, a cup of coffee, and says, what was all that about? And I said, I don't have a clue, Dad, but I know I got to get dressed because I got to be at school in 45 minutes. So I get dressed, I go to practice. Rich Ciccone, again, great guy and great coach, sees me at practice and he says, do you know some guy named Gene Riley? And I'm like, no, but I talked to him this morning. He goes, well, yeah, he talked to me for about an hour today. I said, what did he talk to you about? He goes, you. I said, well, hopefully you lied. He said, I lied very well. I said, well, thanks. Now, again, I don't have a clue who Gene Riley is or what this Country Day thing is or anything else. Well, the next thing I know, I get a phone call, and it's like, hey, we want you to come out for an interview. I'm like, huh? So they flew me out. They put me up at a hotel in Southfield. The assistant headmaster at the time, Jerry Hansen, picks me up in his car. It was a Ford EXP. He had his 3 kids, me and him in this car. I look in the back seat, and here's this poor kid sitting on the old transmission thing, the drive shaft, the old hump in the car, as people would say. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm in a 3-piece suit. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, I went through about a 9-hour interview. And again, it's like, the crazy part for me is we were supposed to play Lafayette High School. Homer was playing Lafayette, which is a school on the Onondaga Reservation, which we had always a difficult time beating. And I'm missing the game to be at this interview. And it's driving me crazy, because it's a big placement game for the playoffs, the Central New York playoffs coming in. So I'm really worried about that game. I'm not, nobody has cell phones back then. What's a cell phone? So there's no texting, like this is what the score is and stuff. So Country Day's playing Catholic Central, and Dave Phillips is the coach, and I'm watching the game, and Dr. Schlegel, the headmaster, at the end of the interview, he goes, oh, let's go watch the game. I said, yeah, it'd be great. So I go out and I watch, and it was ugly lacrosse. There's no doubt about it.
From what you're used to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is just ugly lacrosse.
Right.
And Dr. Schlegel's very, very proud, as he probably should have been at the time. And he looked at me and he said, so how would your team do against us? Not being politically astute. I said, Dr. Schlegel, if we didn't beat you by 30 goals, I'd be really, really disappointed. And he looked at me, I looked at him, and I thought, well, if there was ever going to be a job offer, you just lost it, Big Mouth. Nice touch. So I go home, and I think we beat the team. Homer beat Lafayette, which was for the first time ever. It was a great win. Kids are excited, and everything else. And I get back, and we made a little bit of a run into the playoffs. We beat 2 pretty good teams, and we ran into Baldwinsville, again a Syracuse team, and I think we lost by 2 to Baldwinsville, and it was a great game, And since then I've followed Homer, and last year I think they lost by a goal in the semifinals to get to the state finals, And it's been fun watching the growth of that program, but. Sure. And then I ended up at Country Day. So in 1982...
so you got the job offer, obviously.
Got the job. They offered it. Came out to Michigan in 1982 and met Art Hoffman on a school bus going up to football camp. I show up to this thing. Again, typical upstate New York kid. I got long bushy hair. I've got a bushy mustache. I got a Mickey Mouse hat on. I've got a beat-up T-shirt and a pair of shorts. I had just come from a tournament that we were playing in Ithaca with the travel team. And I drove that night and stayed at 7 Mile and, 7 Mile and 75 at a Holiday Inn, not knowing anything, again, about Detroit. I mean, I crossed through the tunnel, I don't have a clue where I am. I see a Holiday Inn off the road, I got to get some sleep, I pull in, the guy has like a 9-inch piece of plexiglass in front of him, 9 inches thick. I don't really notice it, nor do I care. Pay the freight, ask for a wake-up call, get to this thing, and all these Country Day football coaches are in khakis, white golf shirts, little Country Day footballs, and and I'm just like, well, you look good. And the AD, Chuck Schmidt, looks at me and says, "Can I help you?" Somewhat in a questioning kind of way. And I said, "Yeah, hi, I'm Bob Dowd. I'm your new history teacher and football and lacrosse coach. How are you?" He just kind of looked at me and he said, "Yeah, you get on that bus." Okay. So I've got a copy of that. I guess it was the Detroit News and the New York Times Sunday papers with me because that's what I'm planning on reading. I get on the bus and here's this guy, this clean-cut looking guy with this Country Dave shirt on and khakis. And he goes, "Hi, I'm Art Hoffman." I said, "Hi, I'm Bob Dowd." And he goes, "Yeah, I just came from Ithaca College." And I just said, "I just came from Cortland State." And I looked at him and I said, "I really should hate you, because Cortland State and Ithaca College, there's nothing good about the two."
Right.
And we struck up a great friendship, and neither of us had a place to stay. We became roommates and coached lacrosse together for the next 8 years.
So your Country Day at 8 years then?
I was there 14 total.
14. I didn't realize you were there that long.
14 total. I was Artie's assistant and head JV coach for 8 years. Got to bang heads with Ron Hebert, and when he was at Rice, and I think Charlie Sanders, I think his name is. He's now the head of school at Cranbrook. He was the JV coach at Cranbrook, and eventually Tommy Grazer at Cranbrook, and a bunch of these old medieval names,
right,
that no one knows today. And Art left and went down to Charlotte Country Day, and I had a chance to be the head varsity coach and took it.
How long were you head coach at Country Day?
1990 to 1996.
So then John Kenny came in after you.
Bill Zimmer.
Bill Zimmer came in.
Bill Zimmer took it for a year, won the state championship, lost in the Midwest semis, I think, to Rice. They had beat him in the regular season. They lost in the semis, and they beat him in the finals for the state championship. And excuse me for
That's not a problem.
And then John Kenny came in after that.
Your recollection of what you came from, I know you made the comment about you beat him by 30.
Right.
But what was your first thought process as you're now coaching lacrosse in Michigan? What was what went through your mind that you had to be a good lacrosse coach? How did you get, what was the process?
It was
you
an
weren't the head coach
interesting
at the time, were you?
No, I was the assistant. I was assistant varsity, head JV coach. And I mean, Art and I both had the same philosophy. He was more of a little different in regards to set offenses. I'm more of really of a Central New York running gun Syracuse guy. I mean, that's what Cortland ran. That's what Syracuse ran. That's what everybody did. Yeah, just bring the ball down, pressure everywhere, shoot and score,
and go.
Rock and roll, baby.
Right.
That's just the way the game's supposed to be played.
50 shots a game.
Yeah, and Art was more of a set it up and play, set plays kind of thing, which was fine. He let me do my thing. I helped him out with his thing, and we had a great relationship. I worked with goalies. I worked with defense. I was the good cop. Art was the bad cop. So Artie would yell at a kid for 25 seconds and then go back to the game. My job was to explain what Art said and get the kid ready to go.
You came from an area that was already pretty well ingrained in lacrosse across the state of New York.
It was growing. It was right at the point, Greg, I'd compare the early 70s when I started playing in Central New York to what it was in the late 80s, early 90s in Michigan.
Okay.
It was just starting to explode. I mean, you just started seeing high schools, Jordan Elbridge in Central New York and Skinny Atlas and all these places that never had teams, all of a sudden are having teams. I gave Cortland State, Hobart, and Syracuse get a ton of credit for the explosion in Central New York. The coaches went out and they worked with parents. They worked with anybody who wanted to get involved with coaching. They made their programs accessible. We had great officials. Walt Munsey was one of the officials at the time and for the growth of the game and ran a great camp. There was no individual camps or team camps. And basically you went to go learn the game of lacrosse. So the camps were just starting. Kids fell in love with it. I mean, that's one of the things about lacrosse. Play it once and you'll love it.
With those three colleges in New York, having, by your own words, growth, we had a varsity team in East Lansing, and we didn't grow that fast here.
No, what we ended up with, and here's where the problem began, I think. The problem is with athletic directors. I hate to say it, but ADs
didn't know the sport.
Well, one, they don't know the sport. Two, ADs really don't want to take on any more responsibilities.
Right.
They look at it and say, "Boy, it's just one more thing to do." there's other ADs who look at things like that and say, yeah, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. It gets more kids involved. We should think about it. So one of the things, I mean, Art was the president of the Coach Association for a while, and then Ron was the president. And then when Ron left Cranbrook, I took over because Ron went to Northwood. So I took it over, and Ron had gone to school board meetings and met with ADs and stuff to help expand the game. Excuse me. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do was the same thing. People like at Novi, other school districts would call me. Parents would say, can you come talk to the school board? Can you come talk to our AD about the game? Because a lot of people had the impression that field lacrosse was box lacrosse. A game with no rules, swing the stick, knock somebody's head off, have fun, and they were just terrified of it. And it's like, no. Field lacrosse is so much different. Let's talk about it. So the thing that we found was that all of a sudden in the mid to late 80s, early 90s, we had an explosion. We grew from, when I got out here in 82, there were 6 teams. L'Anse Creuse North, Catholic Central, Brother Rice, Country Day, and Cranbrook. And what people don't realize, a lot of people give Country Day or think Country Day was the first place to have lacrosse, and it wasn't. It was L'Anse Creuse. Don Lutz played at Bowling Green, brought the game to L'Anse Creuse, and did a great. I mean, Don Lutz is, to me, he is the guy who started high school lacrosse in Michigan. He's a phenomenal gentleman and knows the game inside now. I mean, I have great respect for Don and used to help him out with his camps and stuff.
Would you be surprised that that's not the first team in Michigan?
No, I would be.
Mike Jolly has a yearbook from Chippewa Valley in 1965 with a high school team.
Chippewa Valley, really?
Chippewa Valley, because he was teaching there and subbing there. And while there was no league, they played essentially. They played the old Windsor team. They played the Detroit teams.
You tagged in some of the Midwest.
And so this is a bunch of high school kids playing against adult men
and college
JV guys, JV teams, and you can't count as your first official team because it wasn't really school sponsored. But he has a yearbook from Chippewa Valley.
I didn't know that.
That's what came out in the first interview.
The story changes now. I can tell you that.
Well, it's a beer question. It's more along the lines of L'Anse Creuse is the first official high school team, but there was actually a team of 65 because they've got it recorded in a yearbook.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah, so
I think that's absolutely awesome. But but we had a huge growth spurt. We really did. We went from probably like 15 teams to almost 30 teams in a matter of 1 or 2 years. We finally saw some growth to the west, which we've been trying to get for a while. We saw a little bit of growth to the south. We saw teams that in the area that, all of a sudden picked it up. A lot of Catholic League schools picked it up. And Tom Rashid would call me when he was the head of the Catholic League and want to know what was going on and, what was the difference and how can we make it better and those kinds of things. And then then in 96, I left Country Day and came here for an opportunity. And
did you coach here?
I did not. The Troy Schools has an interesting component. Once you become an administrator, you can't coach, you can't teach. You basically are an administrator. And as an athletic director, I understood that rule. I didn't like it, mind you. I would have loved to have coached here. But you also realize that you got a lot of things to do. Your time is not very flexible. I couldn't be at every practice probably. And then there's the conflict between coaches. As an AD coaching, does he favor lacrosse? Does he give this to them and not to us? And you don't want that. You really don't want to have that attitude. So,
is there a while that you missed it?
Oh, I missed it every day. There's not a day gone by that I don't miss it.
Right. Just a different role for you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really difficult to stay on the sidelines and keep your mouth shut and not look at your head coach and say, I really think you're stupid. Let's put this in instead. I've been blessed with really good coaching staffs here. Chris Ferrari, Billy Caceres, Nick Stenson for a period of time, Justin Suarez now. Just good guys who really buy into an idea of a program and how to develop it.
Your man went to Ohio?
Yeah, that was Billy Caceres. He left here and went to Ohio State.
He's a good coach.
Yeah, he was a very good coach, especially for a young guy. He did a great job. Really built the foundation of a program, got us to 2 semifinals, and had some tough luck with Catholic Central in one, and some real tough luck with Brother Rice in another one. But we've got a good, solid program here that I like. So that's kind of the history of what I've been able to screw up.
just to digress a little bit.
Yeah.
We're talking about Central New York versus, we always hear about Long Island attacks. By your own words, we're not real favorable to guys on Long Island because there's that, obviously, Michigan State love-hate relationship. What made Central New York unique in what they did, and that probably had some Syracuse influence, and what made Long Island unique?
Central New York becomes unique, I think, in a sense that it's more of a hard-nosed type lacrosse. You know, one of the things that we were taught when I was playing and that when I was coaching was, you know, ground balls, you take the body first. You know, and basically you got to win. You got to win the ground ball war. And so you got to play physical. I mean, you'd walk out of a game at Cortland State, a Cortland Hobart game, or a Cortland Syracuse game, or a Cortland Cornell game, because at that time Division III could play Division I schools, you know. And, I mean, there was no body that was not sore. I mean, bodies were flying everywhere. And that's just how you played. You played a hard-nosed, tough game. And a lot of that was because of the weather. I firmly believe in the fact that we could never get out onto fields. I mean, we played in parking lots from probably mid-February to mid-April. You know, to maybe even the third week of April. I mean, I remember having to play at Cornell some games in snowbanks because, you know, we had no fields. And there was a kid named Tommy Higgins who was a little midfielder for us, and we're playing Binghamton at Cornell, and there's snowbanks all over the field, and Tommy gets checked out of bounds into a snowbank, and he comes out, and he's got this blue back rack, you know, L35 on, and you can't see his face. It's all full of snow. You know, so he has to unsnap his helmet and take his helmet and shake his head, put his helmet back on. But, you know, I think at Long Island is a much more finesse game, I think, in a lot of ways. The sport was involved longer down there. I mean, they'd had the sport since the 50s. Central New York had the sport since the early 70s. Their weather is definitely much better than it is in upstate New York. And I think that their traditions were a little bit richer and a little bit deeper, you know. So, you know, like, people will look at U of M football and say, well, that's, you know, this, and this, and it's the working man at Michigan State. And that's kind of how I look at lacrosse between Central New York and Long Island. You know, it's kind of the pretty boys around the island. They look nice, they look cute. And the working guy is the guy that's up in Syracuse, carries a stick to the job, you know, and just grunts it out and pounds you and hustles for every loose ball and every little thing.
Now we come back to Michigan for a second, and we've got this, it's growing. You're leading at this point. The MHSAA is sort of formulating into the MHSAA, and there's been some stories that folks saw in East Lansing, saw regionals making lots of money, and the last seating, even Mr. Ebert had a conversation about they were doing a pop-up toy to make the seating to get the numbers, because it was this whole thing, and they told that story to Tom Rashid, and apparently that wasn't exactly the truth, but it was the truth, and the state took it over, and we've been now 16 years with the state from that perspective. Maybe some thoughts on where it was in the later stages of the MHSAA or MSLA into the throes we are now.
There were three of us. And unfortunately, I was the executive director. Steve Schleicher, who was at, I think, L'Anse Creuse North, was an AD there. And Steve was his brother. God, I can't remember his name. Steve was the parent here. But his brother was the AD at L'Anse Creuse North, and he was the executive director. Because we needed an executive director to make decisions. Things were getting too big and too crazy in the mid-90s. And so his brother stepped up and took it over, which we appreciated, you know, because you couldn't have the president of the Coaches Association making decisions. And we knew that. We needed a Jack Roberts position. So he took it over. And then when I became the AD here, he called me and he said, look, you're the new one. I'm like, whoa, stop. Don't do this to me. And it's like, no, you're it. I'm done. I'm tired. And I'm retiring relatively soon. So you're going to be it.
And before you go any farther, you should point out, or at least I should point out, that the folks who were involved in this league at that point, there's not a lot of people there's a lot of very specific alpha men in this group. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of guys with opinions.
Oh yeah,
and very strong opinions. So it takes, when you say it's hard work, it's blending all of those thoughts and ideas together.
Yeah, and you know, and one of the things that people misunderstand, When you have a distinct opinion and you're passionate about the sport, you're going to express that opinion, or at least I hope you would. And at the time, and I still do today, I mean, people look at me and say all kinds of wonderful things about me. Very few of them are, well, anyways. But one of the things about lacrosse is the fact that I have a passion for this game. This isn't a passing fancy for me. This is something I've been doing since 1972. Watching and playing and coaching and helping something grow. And so you have an idea, you have an opinion, and you express it. And people say, you know, well, you're this, that, and the other thing. No, I'm just passionate about the game. And if you can't match my passion, I'm sorry, but I have a passion for this.
Right.
And that's really directed where I've gone with a lot of my decisions, or a lot of things that I talk about to other people about the sport, much more than any other sport. So when Mr. Schleicher left and I became the executive director, and that was in 1997, I think, you know, there was some, again, growing pains. You know, what can we do, what can't we do? We tried to model ourselves on the MHSAA, only in the sense that they had an established rule book. We also knew that for this game to grow, we had to establish ourselves. We were basically known as a pirate operation. You know, no rules, no nothing, you know. No, we have rules. Here's our constitution. Here's our rule book, which basically was the MHSAA handbook, but without the travel restrictions. You know, teams that wanted to travel could travel. And if you wanted to play out of state, you could play out of state. And it didn't matter who you were playing, you know. So we needed something, again, to go to athletic directors and go to school boards. And so parents would have some ammunition to say, yeah, this is why we want to bring it in. There are rules. There are set things that we have to follow. Here's the eligibility. Here are the things that we have to do. So that's why we modeled ourselves.
And at the same time, we also had about 75 or 80 teams that had grown to that.
We were growing.
We were a sport large enough to command some respect.
And not just that, but we were a sport that was also getting to the point where it was getting unwieldy.
How?
It was unwieldy from a standpoint of saying, trying to keep everybody on the same page.
Okay.
And in the same book, and basically, you know, in the same basic direction. We had to make a decision. We took it to the Coaches Association, and it was Aaron Frank and Mike Jolly and myself. And we basically came to the conclusion that we needed to contact the MHSAA about possible inclusion into their rules and having them come into lacrosse. It was not an easy decision. It was not a decision we walked into, you know, jumping for joy. But again, Greg, we understood one thing. We understood that the game had to grow. The greatest stumbling block to the game was an AD would look at us and say, you're not an MHSAA sport. We're not going to talk about it. So we knew, we weren't kids either. We weren't little boys and girls walking into this meeting. We understood what we were going into. We had our eyes wide open. We also understood the fact that, you know, we were going to have to make some changes. We knew that. Because we knew that if we were going to grow and become a legitimate sport in the state of Michigan, we had to become part of the MHSAA. We just had to. So we knew we were going to sacrifice some stuff, but we also went in with a position of strength, saying, we don't have to become part of you. We'll continue on doing exactly what we're doing. But we want to enter this, and there are certain things that we want, and we know we're going to have to bend on some other things. And we had 2 or 3 meetings with Jack in his office. Tom was there, Rashid was there, and it was, they were cordial. But at the same time, you know, we basically said, look, this is what we want. We understand your role. We understand our role. We understand for our sport, we're going to have to give up some stuff, but we're also going to carry some stuff in.
Did this community, the lacrosse community, did our lacrosse community understand that when they make rules, and I'll use the one that's probably the most obvious, is the travel rule of 300 miles. Did they understand that the MHSAA makes rules for every sport, and that not just lacrosse itself, And my point to that is you can't make exceptions for everything because you can't run anything. Did they really understand that?
I think they did. I think they did.
Well, even today they don't seem to understand it.
It doesn't mean they like it.
Okay, different story.
Doesn't mean you like it.
Right.
I think they understood it. We tried to make it very clear to them what the rules were. You know, one of the things that the MHSAA had never done, they had never seeded a tournament. And one of the conditions that we demanded from them, I mean, if they were going to take us, we had to have some things. You know, we're giving up a lot. We gave up travel. We gave up time of practice, when to start. There really wasn't an official start date. You know, usually it was the last week in February. But we said, yeah, here's the set date. You know, here's the set number of games. I mean, all those things. I mean, the last year when I was at Country Day, my last year, but the year we won a Midwest Championship, in 1993, I think it was, we ended up playing, I think, 22 or 23 games that season. You know, Midwest games, Midwest Championship weekend, Michigan games, Michigan playoffs, Michigan State Championship weekend. You know, it was a lot of games in a short span of time. And that, you know, again, it's a plus or minus. But so we knew we were going to get limited in games. We knew the travel rule was coming in. But we also knew that we wanted to be able to seed our tournament as we had been seeding the tournament.
That was huge.
Yeah, and Jack agreed to that. He understood that. We explained the seeding process to him. We explained how we seeded our tournaments. And we convinced him, because we had just added, several years prior to that, we had added a third division for the state tournament, if you remember. We had Division I, we had Division II. Teams were able to move up and down in their divisions as they felt they would be able to compete. Division I was always smaller than Division II. But we also had a Division III tournament, which was basically for new programs. So instead of going into a division, if you were a new program and just getting crushed, you were able to drop into this third tournament and play comparable teams. So we had explained that to Jack and why we put it in, and Jack was receptive to that. So we were able to keep seeding the tournament.
If he'd have known that Chris Farley's child's pop-up toy was part of that process with Ebert, I'm sure that they would. That's of all stories that we've done so far, that's the one that's got the most laughs, because it turns out that it wasn't quite as scientific as we might have thought it was.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I was on that committee for the first, I don't know, handful of years or so. You know, and it was interesting in the sense that, Lax Power played a huge role in that. Just being able to get wins and losses, seeding teams, putting teams in regions, putting them in divisions based on what the MHSAA wanted to do and those kinds of things. So, I know a lot of people are still upset about that whole thing. And when we did that in 2005, I understand that. And they thought it was the death knell of high school lacrosse. Maybe, maybe not. But what it allowed us to do, we had to be able to put aside what we felt. I love the travel rule, don't get me wrong. When I was coaching, we went to all the Ivy Leagues that were south of Cornell and basically would use their facilities. We'd play local teams. We played Ithaca High. We played Horseheads. We played Cortland, where I went to school. We'd go to Virginia. We'd go to Carolina. We'd go to all over the place, and we loved playing those games. And we played in the Midwest, and we played all over Pittsburgh and Ohio and everywhere else. And and we understood the travel rule very well, and we enjoyed that opportunity. But I also understood that I was giving that up. I was not giving up. Excuse me. I'll rephrase it. I was taking that away from schools. I negotiated that away for us to be able to become a legitimate sport, and that took away a lot of the barriers from athletic administrators, school administrators, who didn't want to expand, who didn't want to see another sport come in, who didn't want to fund it, who didn't want to try and figure out how to run it. That was the barrier. Because once they would say, well, you're not an MHSAA sport, like, oh, no, we are. Well, now it's like, now where do you go?
Right.
Well, now how do you stop it? You can't stop it. So, in a sense, we sold that part of our soul to get the expansion that we have today.
I don't want you to be critical, but do you think it's been a good marriage?
I do. I think the MHSAA is looking to evolve. I think they're looking to make some changes. I know that Tom was open to fall ball, which was, I was shocked and elated when he said that at an OAA athletic directors meeting. I was completely disappointed in my brethren athletic directors when they all said no. They didn't want a fall ball opportunity. And that would have been for every sport. You would have been able to work in the off season with your own kids, more than 4. And I think that's a detriment to us today. I think we lose kids to soccer academies, to 7-on-7 football teams, and those kinds of things because we're not allowed to work with our own kids.
Not coached by academically based coaches who work as professionals versus travel, which is kind of where the travel argument comes in.
Yeah, the pay to coach thing, and I don't like it. I don't like the direction that it's going in today for lacrosse. And I ran a travel program. I ran one with my son for Christopher, and Mike Dungan was working with me, and with the old Raging Rhino kind of thing. And it wasn't a livelihood for us. We didn't make money on it. We kept it low. We played all over the East Coast. We put ourselves in some really dynamite tournaments. And we played in the Rutgers tournament. We played in the Cornfield Classic in Tully. We played all over upstate New York and all over Virginia and not Virginia, but all over Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And the idea was, expose our kids to top level lacrosse programs. I didn't care if we won or lost, but we wanted to play top level programs so kids could see what it was all about.
I've run a USSA nonprofit 501(c) ski team for 25 years. So I've been a little critical of travel programs that lie to kids. Not good travel programs, but some who tell them things that maybe aren't always true. And I think there's those out there.
But they're out there in every sport, right?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. You can argue in every sport, but you kind of want to understand that, you can play for your travel team, but if you win a state championship, they're not going to hang a banner any place except in your school.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the process. And then when I see guys like Scott Rogers, who spent some time with this summer coming out to sail with me, and he made $16,000 last year as one of the best goalies in the professional league. That's a chump change for an NBA player who gets that much money for a stipend for...
That's meal money.
Yeah.
For a week.
Yeah, so sometimes I don't think we have that discussion from that standpoint. What's been good in your mind since the MHSAA, and maybe some things you can talk about a little bit that you'd like to see improve?
Well, again, I think the ability to expand the programs and the growth that we've had. For a long time we were an I-94 program. Yeah, that's what everybody kind of looked at. If you followed I-94, Grand Rapids, Holland, back to East Lansing, back to, Metro Detroit, that's basically where all the lacrosse programs were. Now we're moving up I-75. We're in northern Michigan. Now we're kind of getting out in different places. We're down south of Ann Arbor. We're seeing growth. We've got a lot of good things, I think, happening for us. I think the MHSAA has the inclusion to the MHSAA has helped us a great deal in that. As I said, it takes that stumbling block away.
With new administration in East Lansing, do you see the landscape maybe a little more pliable?
I don't know. It's one of those things. I know Mark Ewell. He's a good man. I think he's a fair guy. I think that he has what's the best interest of high school athletes at heart. I think Jack did too. It's actually kind of humorous because every year we get the new set of rules as an athletic administrator, and God, I feel like I'm going to become a Division I athletic administrator soon with a 900-page rule book.
Compliance officer next door.
Yeah, really, I got to find somebody. I don't think Troy Schools is willing to hire anybody yet to do that, but I think less is more. Personally, but I understand where they're coming from. There's all kinds of movement afoot right now of student athletes. There's all kinds of intrusions of private sport groups coming in. The allure for parents to think that their son or daughter is going to get a scholarship and those kinds of things, it just isn't there. And one of the funny things is Byron Collins, who coached at Country Day for a period of time, came from Penn State. He went back and said, was it Rutgers? Was it Delaware? I think now he's running a club team in his hometown in Jersey. Byron's a great guy, and it was a genius in lacrosse. I mean, he did so many cool things. I learned a ton from him, when he was here. But one of the things that he made very clear to me was that there's 12.5 scholarships in Division I lacrosse. What parents don't understand, and kids don't understand sometimes, is they think that 12.5 is 12.5 every year. No, it's 12.5 over a 4-year period of time. College football has 85 in Division I. Lacrosse has 12.5. So when you have 50 kids on the team, how many of those kids do you think are really getting money? A very limited number. And as Byron said, defensemen are a dime a dozen. You don't give a defenseman a penny. They just want to come play for you. You give money for an attackman, you give money for a goalie, and you give money to midfielders sometimes. But there's not a lot of money to be given. Even books, it's not even like getting books.
Well, Division III, they get nothing.
Yeah, so. And you get actually a lot of times Division III is a better deal because you get grants and you get scholarships and stuff like that.
Grades.
Academic is based on how much they want you.
Right.
So there's a lot of wiggle room in D3 that there's not in D1. And what I just think that parents need to understand that it's not about that. It's about your son or your daughter having an opportunity to play a wonderful game, having an opportunity to be coached by good people who care about them, having an opportunity to enjoy a great game. And we somewhere along the line, Greg, we've lost the ability to just enjoy that part, because we said, we want you playing year round, we want you on its travel team, we want you here, we want you there. And for the child, it's like, okay, when does the kid get to be a kid?
Are we short good coaches?
We're short a lot of good coaches.
Yeah, that's, I think, the other process from that.
We're short a lot of coaches. But again, that's a growing pain.
Right.
And that's a pain that every area goes through. Every area has gone through it. The guy that coached me when I was in high school, Jack Savage, was a great guy. But Jack was a football coach. He didn't know a whole lot about lacrosse.
Right.
Because there wasn't a whole lot of lacrosse coaches in central New York.
Do we have a coaching problem? I mean, there's not a ton of really good coaches in this state as well.
We have a big coaching problem, but it's a natural occurrence. Meaning the fact that we've grown so quickly and we keep adding more and more programs, which is amazing. I love that part. But with it comes, unfortunately, there's not a lot of people who have a lot of experience coaching our kids, coaching the programs. It's not like these are college kids that are coming back. And I'll tell you the other part that I think is that schools, this is a double-edged sword for a school district. They don't look at hiring coaches as a great thing. They're looking to hire great teachers, which is 100%. I'm with you.
Absolutely.
And that's our goal. Our goal is to teach our children, 100%. So you want to hire great teachers, but you also, I would also love to be able to hire someone that's a great coach on top of being a great teacher coming out of school. Well, in Michigan right now, we don't have a lot of kids that have college lacrosse experience looking for teaching jobs. So it's not like it was in the old days where you'd lose a physical education teacher, you bring one in, and in college he played or she played a fall sport and then lacrosse.
Well, being the same age group as you,
Mm-hmm.
the mentoring process is that I spent a lot of time being a freshman JV coach before I ever got to varsity.
Oh yeah.
As a head coach.
Sure.
Even when there was holes, they didn't hire you until you didn't have the process. And I also know from sitting on a couple of USL boards that if you look at Division III young ladies, which is my background, is they're failing at a high rate because they know X's and O's, but they were never taught how to not piss off an alumni. They were never taught the mentoring process that you and I have just sort of understood. Because you had somebody slapping you around before you ever got to that position.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times too, I look at my own profession now as an athletic administrator and say, do we just hire a coach and then walk away? Do we just say, okay, you got the program and then go and leave it alone? There's got to be a time where you mentor your coaches, where you look at it and say, yeah, it wasn't a great first year. What were our problems? What didn't we do well? let's work on that. Let's go to some conferences. Let's go to some clinics. Let's talk about communication. Let's talk about some things.
But how do you balance that when you have an older coach with experience and a 29-year-old athletic director is going to now show you how to coach when he doesn't have a clue?
Well,
and that's also part of the problem, and that's probably more prevalent than anything.
But both have to understand that it's a growing process for both.
Okay.
You know, as the 30-year coach, you know, you got to realize that, yeah, you got to answer to somebody. You're going to answer to the 30 or 29-year-old AD, let's say. I couldn't even think about doing this job at that age. And then say, okay, what can we learn from each other? And the AD has to be open to that.
Right.
He can't just, or she just can't come in and sit down and say it's my way or the highway.
Just briefly then, where does parents fit into that? Where do lacrosse parents fit into that scenario of success in a program? Because we obviously have changed the model since you started to now, where parents,
Sure.
how that fits, because now they are an integral part, and maybe not always a good integral part of the formula.
We're still kind of lucky, I think, and it's in a kind of crazy way. I'll tell you why. I think we're lucky in a sense that a lot of parents still don't know the game.
Good point.
You know, I mean, when you talk to somebody about baseball, I mean, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of managers Troy has, but every one of them wants to go down and tell, you know, Ron Gardenheimer exactly what he needs to do to make the Tigers a contender. I don't know how many thousands of people in Troy are ready to get on to Matt Patricia and tell him, you know, these are the things you need to do in football.
Right.
Because let me tell you, pal, this you're not doing right.
Right.
Okay? In lacrosse, it's still a relatively new game. It really is.
So ignorance helps them.
It's a game that's been here maybe 45 years, you know. And in 45 years, that's not a lot. Whereas baseball, you know, football, hockey, good God, hockey. I mean, everybody's a general manager and everybody out here is a coach for hockey.
We've talked a lot about stories about old guys and everybody was friends and everybody got along. Again, small world. I'll use the ski world where you put 10 high schools on one ski hill, basically the size of a football field. Coaches learned to get along quite well.
Yeah.
They got along well because their success was dependent upon the guy from the other school. I'm guessing if you put 10 lacrosse teams, 10 football teams on your high school football field, there'd be a lot of difficulty in the same process. Maybe yes, maybe no. Eventually they would work it out because they recognize it's a very finite type area. My point to it is that I think we're losing, as we grow, the kids that know each other, the stories that are coming. I mean, we're doing this to get the stories out, but I'm not sure a lot of them spend a lot of time talking to each other.
They don't.
And that's unfortunate.
And again, I'm not part of nor do I want to become part of the Coaches Association or what goes on with those guys.
Right.
I mean, there's a time and place for everything. You know, my time was late 80s to late 90s. I had that decade of time there where, like it or not, I found myself in a position because I have an opinion, and, you know, God knows I'm not afraid to express it sometimes, you know, just sometimes. You know, that put me in a position where, you know, I would give my opinion, and some people liked it, some people didn't. You know, some people said, you know, hey, do what you got to do, and so we did it. You know, that was my time. You know, my time has passed in a sense in Michigan. I think, you know, I have a limited amount of time in this position, and when I'm done here, you know, I'm going to go somewhere, and I'm just going to find a program somewhere and say, I would just love to work with your freshmen. You know, that's all I want to do. But I think that what I think is missing, coaches had no problems. I didn't have a problem talking to Steve Bristol when he was the head coach at Cranbrook, you know, about what Upper Arlington was doing. And Steve would ask me, you know, what are you going to do to counter it? Well, here's what I'm going to do. You know, I'm going to try and do this and this to Teddy Wolford, and knowing that Teddy's teams at Upper Arlington were superiorly coached and superior athletes and great lacrosse kids and amazing lacrosse IQ. And I think that is the phrase that we're missing right now in Michigan. Our kids, and I'll talk for Athens kids, our kids don't have a great lacrosse IQ. In other words, what's natural? What I see when I'm standing on the sideline of practice and I'm watching Justin run the offense, or, you know, Joey Kemp run the offense, and, you know, what kids like Matt Tucker or Cyrus Fasihi and some of the kids that played for me in the early 90s, even the late 90s, what they knew about, like they knew when to cut. They knew when that pass was coming. They could anticipate that because they were lacrosse fanatics. You know, they went to camps. They watched games whenever they were on. They watched film. We would talk about it. Our practices at Country Day were no more than 2 hours. And by the time we got into the tournament, if they went 45 minutes, that was a long practice. Because I knew our kids were beat up, and I knew we were playing 4 games in 5 days. And it was like, you know what? I'm not going to beat you up, fellas. I need you at the end of 5 days. But at the same time, our kids had an innate sense of what to do. I watch lacrosse today, and the lacrosse IQ is just not there. I mean, I'm talking to our soccer coach here, and you know, we were 21-0 this year and ranked 1 in the state and got beat in the district finals. And I was talking with Todd Hugh about it, and he's like, yeah, I mean, our soccer kids don't have a great soccer IQ. You know, they're developing a feel, but they don't have that. Billy Keenis, our football coach, same thing. You know, Dave Scott, our basketball coach, same thing.
Is that one-sport athletes?
They're one-sport athletes in a lot of cases, but they're also kids that, you know, Greg, growing up, if Cortland State was playing at home, we'd cancel lacrosse practice because we'd all go watch the game. And we would talk about the game all day long in school. You know, if they were playing Salisbury, or they were playing Hobart, they were playing Geneseo, they were playing Brockport. Who cares who they played? But, you know, Boku Henderson, who coached at Michigan State, was a defenseman at Cortland State, and we loved him because it was a riot watching him take his helmet off in the mid-'70s, because all of a sudden his hair would go poof, and he had the best fro you ever wanted to see in your life. And he's packing that sucker inside a back rack helmet. You know, but we would talk about what Boku would do. We'd go home, and we would practice those checks. You know, a buddy of mine was an attackman, Steve Poskanzer, and I was a defenseman, and Steve would try to do what, you know, the current attackman at Cortland State was trying to do, and I'd try to do what Boku was doing to the kid from Hobart. Even with my own son, who was a lacrosse player at Athens, you know, it'd be like, Chris, you want to come watch, you know, I want to watch the quarterfinals with Syracuse. Yeah, okay, and he'd watch it for about 20 minutes and then leave. You know, and it's like, are you in the backyard shooting or doing what you're trying to do? He's like, no. You know, he's playing a game, he's doing something else. The tough part for Michigan kids is that they don't know how to use that. They don't know how to sit there and say, wow, did you see that? How did he shoot the ball? You know, or watch these YouTube things with, you know, with Ray Ball or some of these great players out there. How do they shoot? They don't take that time, you know, and they're not developing an idea of working with their buddies and saying, you know, let's put a game-like situation in. So if I drive here, what are you going to do and how are you going to do that? That's developing the lacrosse IQ.
I always joke about they can build spaceships, but they can't walk.
Right.
They can flip the stuff, but they literally don't have any idea how to shoot. It's all arms, or it's never a step, or it's not the hip. Yeah. It's all those kinds of things. Last question: what's lacrosse meant to you? To me? Yeah, personally. As a sport, and how it intertwines with all the things you've been involved with. It's a hard question.
It is. It's easy. It's a hard question. The answer is easy. I just can't put it into words.
You have 3 lacrosse helmets in your office. Football helmets. One of those looks like the Cleveland Browns.
Syracuse
looks like the Cleveland Browns. I apologize for Camp Central. It's about the fourth faux pas I've made.
Come on.
So the white and red helmet is
Cortland State.
Well, you still have 3 lacrosse helmets in your office.
Oh yes. Yeah.
So I have to assume that lacrosse is probably at the top of that sports list.
It is. The thing about lacrosse, and I tell this to people sometimes when they ask, it's a sport that once you pick up the stick, and you put a helmet on, you put a pair of gloves on, you play it. And I mean, as a defenseman, I think in high school I scored 1 goal, and it was not for us, it was for the other team. The shot hit my ankle and deflected in past our goalie. In club games, I probably scored, 2 or 3 goals because we were just short people and you had to play. It's not scoring, it's playing. It's such a completely different sport than any other sport. It's a hybrid. It's a combination, but yet it's different. It gets in your blood. It becomes part of you. It becomes it's a draw. It's a drug in a sense, you know. I watch. I can't tell you how many games I watch on television. I've recorded. You know, I've got a TV that's full of lax games, whether the World Games from this past summer or the NCAA championships, and those kinds of things. I still drive out to Central New York with my son periodically, sometimes my daughter, sometimes by me, just to go watch a Cortland State Syracuse weekend or a Cornell Syracuse or Cornell Cortland weekend. I'll still drive out to go watch it and sit in the stands and sit by myself and just watch a game. It's a fascinating game. It's a bonding game that for people who play it, you can talk to people who play it anywhere about it, and it's the same. Doesn't matter who you play, who or where you played.
And looking back through the lens, the folks we've been talking to on this series is that we're now in our 60s and 70s.
Yeah, we are.
And the passion of the sport doesn't die.
No.
And that's kind of the point. I think Mr. Ebert, to quote him one more time, was something to the effect, I think he was comparing himself to Picasso, but the point that he made was, he says, they don't think I've won anything since '91. He says, I'm still fighting for the same stuff. And he's 66 years old, so I think that's kind of part of that lesson. That if you love it, you love it, and that's the way it is.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a game of passion. And when you play it and when you work with it, when you deal with it, it's passionate. And everything that I've ever done in the state of Michigan has always been to make the game better. It's not about me. It's never been about me. If I could have gone through my entire career here in lacrosse in the state of Michigan, no one ever know my name, that'd have been perfect. Perfect way of going. But everything that I've ever done, any battle I've ever fought, has always been for the game. It's not about me. It never has been, and I tell that to our coaches. It's about our kids. It's about the people who have chosen to play it. And I get passionate defending them. I don't think anybody is bigger than the game. And so some people look at me and they say, he's a son of a pup, or he's this, or he's that, or he's a badass, he's a jerk, whatever. Yeah, maybe I am. That's okay. I don't mind that. But I know that any time I've dealt with anybody, it has always been for the betterment of the game. I can go to bed at night, and I can get up in the morning, look in a mirror, and say, have you tried to help the game grow? And the answer's been, yeah. Have you done anything to hinder the growth of the game? And the answer is no.
Well, appreciate your time, and thanks for all that you meant to Michigan.
Hey, not a problem. Like I said, it's been a great run. Love every second.
Thanks, bud.